Today I'm going to be talking about the very first feature film directed by Steven Spielberg, the TV film Duel from 1971. And before I start, just want to say, if I seem a bit off, I've been dealing with a cold the past few days and I'm starting to get over it, but I may seem a little, I don't know, it may sound a little stuffy, or maybe I'm having trouble focusing. It happens when I'm sick. Been a little out of it as far as getting work done. But I'm filming this in May, so everybody seems to be going through colds these days. But anyway, I get that out of the way. Let's get into Duel. Duel was Steven Spielberg's very first film, made at a time where the only directing credits he had were in television. And originally, Duel was a ABC Movie of the Week, which for anyone, I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't know what that is. ABC Movie of the Week was, I guess, a series in the 1970s on ABC. Started originally in 1969, and it was basically just a TV movie every other week, I think, and Steven Spielberg directed one.
Dennis Weaver. Jack, I'm hacked. Why is he doing this?
Duel was originally a story published in Playboy magazine, written by the late, great Richard Matheson. Spielberg first found out about the story from his secretary, who apparently read Playboy for the stories. And I don't know all the pre-production who's and what's behind the scenes, but I guess Spielberg took the story to somebody and they got in touch with Richard Matheson and he wrote the screenplay adaptation of his own story. And this is a TV movie in the 70s, so the scheduling and production had to be very quick. According to what I've read and heard in documentaries, Duel was shot over the course of 10 to 16 days, and they apparently only had a little over a week to get it edited before broadcast on ABC. I'm pretty sure something like that could be done today, but it's very rare that anything's done that quick these days. And it was the movie that showed everybody that Spielberg could be a great director, because he had very little to work with. And according to Spielberg himself in a documentary, he used more of a map showing the road they would be working with, as opposed to storyboarding the whole film. And the film got a lot of great critical praise when it came out, and it was so successful that Universal, one of the studios producing the movie, got the film a theatrical release at one point, and Spielberg shot a few additional scenes to get the film to a feature length. Like the original one was about 70 so minutes, so a few extra scenes were added, and when you read what those scenes are and you watch the film again, like all DVD versions contain the extended version that was released in theaters, and you can kind of get an idea of what the film would be like if it didn't include these scenes, but at the same time, they're well put together and they're edited in very well, and they help drive the story. And the film's story is a businessman named David Mann, played by Dennis Weaver, is going on a little road trip to take care of some account. It's never very specified exactly what kind of business he's in, just that he's working with an account, doing a meeting. Steven Spielberg cast him specifically because of his role in Orson Welles' Touch of Evil. And showing once again how this was a very small production and they had to work very quickly. Weaver was not cast until the night before they started shooting the film. And knowing how stressful it is to make movies, I just can't imagine what that must have felt like for everyone being like, we need our star, but we're not sure we can get him, and then, boom, we got him. Now we don't have to panic. Just very tight, I guess, just very tight-ended, and Dennis Weaver's character, David Mann, as he's driving along the desert highway to his meeting, he encounters a giant oil rig truck, and at first it seems like the truck is just driving up his ass along the highway. He tries to let it pass. Once it's in front of him, it goes as slow as possible. And at first, David just thinks this is some asshole trying to be just fucking with him. And then, as he continues driving down the highway, the truck starts to do some things that eventually reveal that whoever's driving is trying to kill David.
Well, it's about time, Charlie.
David is, for the most of the film, all by himself. There's no one else really around for the most of the film to see what the trucker is doing. And David is driving as fast as he can, trying to escape and eventually just outrun the truck. And becomes, as the title says, a duel between this trucker and this normal man in his car. And this movie has a lot going for it. There are times where you can tell this was a TV film, but it's just so well made that you can tell this film's director had more in him than just directing TV movies. And Spielberg says he sees Duel as the perfect example of what he can accomplish, considering how he had so little to work with at the time. And he says he watches Duel at least once or twice a year just to remind himself what he was able to do. Dennis Weaver does a great job going silent for most of the film because he's by himself, and when he does talk, it sounds pretty natural, like how someone would talk to themselves in a stressful and dire situation. You really grow to care about the character of David Mann. You want to see him survive. You want to see him get out alive. Spielberg said that to him, Duel was kind of like his Godzilla movie, where instead of a giant monster, you have this big-ass fucking truck trying to run some poor guy off the road. And the truck they use was chosen specifically because the front looks like a face. They used a Peterbilt, and a very important thing to note is that we never once see the trucker's face. Whoever's driving this giant truck, we never see them fully. The most we see is like a hand on the steering wheel and maybe the driver's shadow. And there's one scene where David spots the guy's boots as he's on the outside of his car on the other side. And Spielberg has said that this is meant to kind of, the way he shot it, you're meant to almost see the truck as the true villain. And for me personally, I don't see that entirely, because there is a driver behind it. But at the same time, it feels like the driver and the truck are one. Maybe I'm sounding a little too deep. It's been hard to think the past few days. But that is how a lot of people see it, and I definitely see that. Like, the truck is pretty scary to look at. And the way these chase scenes are shot, you can see a lot of films either took inspiration or tried to copy the style of Duel. And the cinematography, which is outstanding, is done by this guy named Jack A. Marta. Spielberg is the director here. This is his film, but you gotta give credit to whoever was in charge of setting up these amazing shots. Like, we get these great angles of the highway and the car and the truck as they're just going down it. And we get these great shots of the camera, I guess, planted on one of the cars or the truck. And watching this movie again to refamiliar myself with it, these chase scenes, after a while, like, they are very suspenseful, but after a while, you almost feel like you yourself are part of the chase. Like, it almost feels like you are on one of the cars yourself. Like, that is how great the camera work is here. You just feel so invested in these scenes, and you're just on the edge of your fucking seat. There's also some extremely good editing here done by Frank Morriss. Morriss. There are a few moments that are a little cheesy, but nothing more you would expect from a 1970s TV movie. But once again, the editing is excellent, and especially on the chase scenes again. I cannot emphasize how amazing these chase scenes are. The music in Duel was done by this guy named Bill Goldenberg. I don't know him from anything else. I'll say this, the music here is extremely chilling. Like, this is not just a suspenseful road chase movie. At times, Duel feels like a horror movie, and a lot of it comes from the music score. I've said it to death, and I'll say it again. A good key element to a lot of horror films is the music. Like, there are a lot of scenes where they wouldn't be as effective if you didn't have the music. Atmosphere is definitely an important key, but music just literally drives everything and just can twist your heart and brain with what you can take and expect. And because I feel everybody should be acknowledged, the producer for Duel was George Eckstein. And if you don't know him from anything, allow me to educate you. George Eckstein was the producer, one of the producers, for the 1960s TV show The Fugitive, which inspired the movie of the same name. And aside from the fact that it's much more cost-effective to shoot in a desert location, The deserts or areas here in Duel really create a good sense of isolation, and Steven Spielberg said the thing that he thought would be the good theme of the film would be that people fear the unknown, and part of that is with the truck driver, never seeing who it is, and the truck itself almost becoming the villain, and we never know the trucker's motivation. It's one of those stories where you don't need to know the motivation of the villain, and you can just go with it. And for anyone that might whine or complain about why this person would do this without knowing why they're doing it, there is a subtle hint as to why the trucker is trying to kill David, and a lot of people probably don't notice it, but it is there in plain sight. On the front of the truck, there are a bunch of license plates, like driver's license plates, about 6 or 8 I think, and they're all plastered on the front of the truck's grill, and for anyone who can't figure it out, this implies that this truck driver, whoever he is a serial killer, and that he has run many other people off the road, killed them, and the license plates are his souvenirs. And David Mann just happens to be his latest victim, who he just picked at random. I'm not sure to an extent just how realistic Duel is, but it's a very scary idea. You go on the highway and somebody kills you, and I do admit the premise of Dune could probably not happen today, with this being the age of cell phones. Cell phones ruined a lot of horror movies. And Kerry Lofton, who was for the most of his career a stuntman, played the diabolical truck driver, and we never see his face, so it's not like he has really any character to this villain. Like I said, even though I don't see the truck as a monster, the way it's set up, you are kind of meant to see the truck as the true villain, and as I said before, the truck and the trucker are kind of one together. And Kerry Lofton asked Steven Spielberg what his motivation for tormenting David Mann was, and the only thing Spielberg said was, "You're a dirty, rotten, no-good son of a bitch." And Lofton replied, "Kid, you hired the right man." It's funny to think Steven Spielberg was ever young enough that he could be called a kid. Excuse me. And Dennis Weaver, David Mann, as a person, David Mann is... we don't know a ton about him other than he's a businessman, he's got a family, a wife and 2 kids, 2 sons I think, and he's on a business trip, and he doesn't seem like the most miserable person in the world, but it's clear he's just going through life with nothing special really going on, and he seems like a very soft-spoken, and I guess the term cowardly would apply to him at first, and he comes off like a guy who's never really had to deal with anything violent or has ever been in a tough situation before. The only scene between him and his wife is over the phone, where you get the feeling they are at that point in a marriage where you don't hate each other, but you don't really have much passion, I guess, going on, and they have this conversation which is, I guess, a little awkward, but also maybe could be interpreted as darkly humorous, where they talk about being at a party the night before, and she says he could have said something to this man there, and he's like, well, what do you want me to have done? To challenge him to a fight? And then she says,
I mean, I think you could have at least said something to the man last night. I mean, after all, he was frankly trying to rape me in front of that whole party.
Not sure how to interpret that line, if she was being serious, or funny, or a bit of both. There is one scene where he's at a gas station and the gas station attendant says, after he turns down an offer for the guy to fix something with the car, the guy says, "You're the boss," and he goes, "Not in my house, I'm not." So yeah, it sounds like the relationship's a little complicated, and as the film goes on, we see David start to get a bit more brave. Like, he's still a kind of wimpy guy throughout the majority of the film, but he's willing to take risks to escape and eventually take down the truck driver. Like, he's pushed to his limit, and he does everything he can to stop this guy, and he's afraid to die, but he's taking the risk to save himself, and
Beat me on the grade. You can't beat me on the grade.
you like him, and he feels very real, and you want to see him escape. And the only other part of the plot to mention would be the ending, so spoilers. At the end of the film, David tries to hide in a corner on the highway and let the truck driver just drive on, and he spends an hour waiting, and then he starts driving again, and 5 minutes later comes to the screeching halt, where we get this very well done terror moment. And then David actually tries to confront, I guess, the truck driver by getting out of the car and walking, but the truck driver won't let that happen, and kind of realizing without any words being spoken, David gets back in his car, and the truck driver, in one of the few times we see a part of his body, sticks his hand out the window, tells him to drive on, as if saying, let's get this shit started. And then David starts driving, and the chase begins, and he pushes his car to its limit, and earlier in the film, the gas station worker told him that his radiator hose could use some work. And it seems like his car might break down, and he might fall victim to the truck driver. But after reaching the top of a hill, and then going down, he is able to pick up speed, and the truck driver, and this is a cool part. The only way David was able to really outrun the truck driver at the end is because he spent a good part of the chase going up and down a hill. And this is a little car he's in. And the truck driver's driving a huge-ass rig. So, you know anything about how cars and trucks work, you know that David, for the moment, has an advantage. And then he drives all the way to a canyon with his car on its last few hinges, and this is where we get the face-off moment. David turns his car around, faces the truck driver. Truck and the car just come at each other, and then David jumps out, and the truck smashes into the car, and the truck is going so fast. And the car explodes, causing the truck driver's windows to be covered in flames. And he tries hitting the brakes, but it's too late. And we get this great crash. The truck going over in slow motion, and this great chilling score by Bill Goldenberg. And we hear every single crash as it goes down into the canyon. And this big stunt, they could only do this in one take because, no surprise, low-budget TV movie, they could only afford one fucking truck. So, when they went over, Kerry Lofton, I believe, was driving, and he simply just jumped out of the driver's seat maybe 10 seconds before the thing went over the cliff. The first time I watched Duel, I noticed that the driver's door is open, like that was a goof, but when I saw that door open, part of me wondered, did the truck driver escape? But it becomes clear when it is at the bottom of the cliff and we see blood dripping off the steering wheel. No, the truck driver is definitely dead. But still, for a moment I was like, oh boy. And David stands there looking down at the remains of his car and the truck and its tank. And David jumps triumphantly. And then the film ends on a kind of bittersweet note where David has defeated the truck driver. But at the same time, he's now stranded in the desert a long ways from the main highway. And the film ends with a shot of him sitting against the sunset on the edge of the cliff, just throwing rocks, leaving it ambiguous and I guess up to interpretation as to what will happen to him. I like to think that David will somehow get back. You better start walking, and you better start hitchhiking. But the way it ended, it didn't feel hopeless, it just felt bittersweet because he defeated the truck driver, but damn, what a horrible day. And that's putting it lightly. So those are pretty much my thoughts on Steven Spielberg's Duel. It was his very first movie before he even had any real serious cred to his name, and in a way it remains a huge classic. And it has amazing buildup of suspense, the storytelling is unfolded at a very good pace, Dennis Weaver does a great job, he's excellent. Very 70s film. Looks very 70s, just gritty, dirty. I love it. And before I forget to acknowledge her, Jacqueline Scott in her one scene as David's wife, she did a good job playing, not necessarily a bitch, but just a stressed out wife character. And Richard Matheson, very well-beloved sci-fi horror author, worked with Spielberg a few times, and this was a good collaboration between the two. And it's just crazy to think that Duel this year is 46 years old. It's just crazy, and I like Steven Spielberg a lot. He's not one of my top 5 favorite directors. You know me. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a Quentin Tarantino, John Carpenter motherfucker all the way. And after discovering Doug Walker and Brad Jones, I've gotten a bit more appreciation for more amateurish or internet type films. And I don't know what else to say. I love Duel. I would give it 8.2 out of 10 stars. It's just great, and anyone who wants to learn a thing or two about how to make a good low-budget film or thriller, or just wants to check out Steven Spielberg's full biography, I recommend you check out Duel. And I think a good note to end this video would be to point out a funny fact. Some scenes from Duel, particularly its chase scenes, were used as stock footage for a few action scenes in an episode of the Incredible Hulk TV series. It was the episode, Never Give a Trucker an Even Break. And Steven Spielberg was apparently very pissed that footage from his movie was used as stock footage for something else. And he couldn't sue because both Duel and The Incredible Hulk were owned by Universal. So he set up a contract for his future films that said no footage from his movies could be used as stock footage. I can get where he's coming from. You put your heart into a movie and then it just ends up being used as you put your heart into a movie and some cheap-ass studio uses it to fill out some time on an episode, and they didn't put any effort into the action. It's like at the time that the 1980s MacGyver show used footage of the chase scenes from the 1969 film The Italian Job to create an action scene for their show. Anyway, I'm gonna go finish my alcohol-laced coffee, and hope you like this review of what is essentially Steven Spielberg's warm-up project for Jaws.